Okay, so they are efficient in analyzing large size unstructured data. Yun si NoSQL. And then another one we have is the operational database. So information related to operations of an enterprise is stored inside this database. Operational, so functions lines like marketing, employee relations, customer services. They all require a database, or what we call operational database. All right, and next we have the relational database. So of course, eto dito tayo magpo-focus sa mga relational database with regards to our course, ano? So the table consists of rows and columns, where the columns has an entry for data for a specific category, and rows contains instances for the data defined according to the category. So relational database, they all have a relationship. Okay, so you have a particular table, and then let's say you have 5 of them laid out in your as your data model, so those will all be related. Okay, so uh, these databases are categorized by a set of tables, all right, that best fits their category, or yung define nating category for a particular uh, database or table. Next we have is cloud database. And the cloud database, right? So alam naman natin yung ibig sabihin ni cloud, right? So there are various benefits of cloud databases, some of which are the ability to pay for storage capacity and bandwidth on a per user basis. So you are renting. Is a database that has been optimized or built for such a virtualized environment. Right? So you can have a database if you don't want a what we call physical database. You can always move to or have the option of availing a cloud or virtualized environment. Okay, and lastly we have the graph database. Okay, so it's a collection of nodes and edges where each node is used to represent an entity and each edge describes the relationship between entities. Okay, so graphic or graph-oriented database or graph database is a type of NoSQL database that uses graph theory to store map and queries and relationships. So it is a type of NoSQL. Alright. So I hope you understand that, but if ever that you have questions, no worries. We are still going to discuss these databases in depth. Okay, but mainly our focus is the overview or the context muna. Okay, next. Alright, dito na tayo sa modeling. So what is data modeling? Alright, so data modeling is the process of creating a data model for that, or for a data to be stored in a database. Okay, so data modeling helps in the visual representation of a data and enforces business rules, regulatory compliances, and government policies on the data. Alright, so this data model is a conceptual representation of data objects. Okay, so data model emphasizes on what data is needed and how it should be organized instead of what operations need to be performed on that data. Okay, so we're going to learn how to create data models. Alright, so of course you can see, as you can see, we have the conceptual right there on the top, conceptual and logical, and then you have the physical data models. So there are 3 data types of data modeling. Alright, so for the 2 types of data model techniques, you have the UML or the ERD. Okay, but for our course we are going to focus on the ERD, or what we call entity relationship diagram. Okay, so as you can see, you have there the comparison of the 2. Alright, so ERD is a diagram, of course, and then you have the UML, which contains many diagrams. Alright, Right, so again, we are going to focus on the ERD for our course. All right. So data modeling. The primary goal of using data models are, of course, ensure that all data objects required by the database are accurately represented. Alright? So omission or kung may aalisin ng data, it will lead to creation of faulty reports and produce incorrect results. So of course, we are going to ensure that once you created a data model, the representations will be accurate. Alright, so that is the primary goal of having or using a data model. And then second, we have a data model helps design the database at the conceptual, physical, and logical levels, which we'll be discussing further later on. Next, you have data model structure helps to define the relationship or relational tables, primary and foreign key, and stored procedures. Alright, so clear picture of data. It provides a clear picture of the base data and can be used by database developers to create physical databases. And then of course you have the identifying missing and redundancy in data. By the use of data model, you can identify them. Right? So if there are so it is of course helpful to identify missing and redundant data. And then lastly, you have upgrade and maintenance, cheaper and faster. So though the initial creation of data model is labor and time consuming, of course this is a very crucial part of designing a database. Initial creation of data model is labor and time consuming. In the long run, it makes your IT infrastructure upgrade and maintenance cheaper and faster. Alright, so matrabaho siya and of course time consuming. However, in the long run, it would be cheaper and way much faster if you're going to upgrade and maintain. Alright, so next, so types of data models. You have conceptual. So there are mainly three types of different types of data models. Okay, so number one, you have the conceptual. So this data model defines what the system contains. Okay, so this model is typically created by business stakeholders and data architects. So the purpose of this is of course to organize and scope and define business concepts and rules. Okay, so ano ba yung mga rules ng business na yun? Ano ba yung rules ng mga requirements ng ating stakeholders or yung mga data architects natin? So it would fall under the area of conceptualizing the data model, okay, as number one. Number two, we have the logical. Okay, so it defines how the system should be implemented regardless of DBMS. Okay, so this model is typically created by data architects and business analysts. Logical aspects of data modeling. All right. So the purpose is to develop technical maps of rules and data structures. So dito na papasok yung mga relationships natin, yung mga implementations natin. So those are under the logical aspect. Number three, you have the physical. So this data model describes how. Okay, so for conceptual is what, for logical is how, and for physical is how as well. So this data model describes how the system will be implemented using a specific DBMS. Okay, so paano ba natin siya patatakbuhin? Okay, paano ba natin siya, ano ba yung mga requirements sa kanya para mag-run sa gantong platform? Okay, so those will fall under the physical. Okay, so again, this data model describes how the system will be implemented. And of course, this model is typically created by the DBA or database administrators and developers. So the purpose is actual implementation of the database. So once you have conceptualized, okay, or you have gathered all the requirements, and then you will proceed now with the logical design. So the logical designs, here you have the relationships, and then finally for the physical you have the implementation. All right, so those are the areas of data models or the types of data models. All right, so we are going to run through an in-depth discussion about that in our further topics. And of course, you have the three basic tenets of data models. So, eto na yung tinatawag natin kanina na entity and attribute, and you have the relationships. So, eto yung mga requirements, no? When you are going to build your logical design. Conceptual model. So you can see here we have the example of our conceptual model. You have the entity of customer, and then you have the entity of your product. And of course, the attributes, those are the ones you can see: customer name, customer number, product name, and product price. So the main aim, the primary aim of this model is to establish the entities and their attributes and their relationships. All right. So characteristics of a conceptual data model. Of course, develop for a business audience. Okay, so this type of data models is designed and developed for a business audience. And then you have the next one is that the conceptual models is developed independently of hardware specifications like data storage capacities, locations, or software specifications like DBMS vendors and technology. So the focus is to represent data as a user will see in the real world. All right. And lastly, you have the conceptual data models known as domain models. Create common vocabularies for stakeholders by establishing basic concepts. So ano ba yung mga stakeholders natin? Stakeholders is an individual or group or organizations who is impacted by the outcome of a particular project. Alright, so stakeholders. And of course, you have the logical data model. So further discuss that, you have logical data models add further information to the conceptual model elements. It defines the structure of the data elements and set the relationships between them. So dito na papasok yung mga relationships natin or tinatawag natin mga cardinality. Physical data model, you have the implementation phase. Okay, so developed for a specific version of DBMS location, data storage, or technology to be used in a project. So you have there the primary and foreign key views. All right. Advantages and disadvantages of data model. So the main goal of designing a data model is to make certain that data objects offered by the functional team are represented accurately. Accurate representation is the keyword there. Alright, so the data model should be detailed enough to be used for building the physical database. So we're talking about the advantages of data models. Okay, so detailed enough to be used for physical database. And then you have the defining relationship between the tables. So the information in the data model can be used for defining the relationship between tables, primary and foreign keys. So later on, we're going to discuss what are the primary and foreign keys and stored procedures. Okay, so next advantage we have is data models help businesses to communicate within and across organizations. Communication in terms of requirements, right? And then you have the data models helps to, or data model helps to document data mapping in ETL, or what we call extraction, transformation, and loading process. So you have, it would help to document data mappings. Very important yung mga data mappings natin, okay? Um, and lastly, of course, you have helps to recognize current or correct sources of data to populate the model. So again, helps to recognize correct sources of data to populate the model. For the disadvantages, to develop data model, one should know physical data stored characteristics. Okay, so you should be knowledgeable when it comes to the physical data stored, okay, or storing or developing. So this is a navigational system produced. Produces complex application development management. So complex application development and management. Isa sa mga disadvantages din yan. The complexity. Next is the small changes would require modification in the entire application. So we need to say if you are going to change a particular area, a particular table or data or definition, you would modify the entire application, right? So that is why it is a disadvantage as well. And then lastly, of course, we have the data manipulation language in DBMS. So there is no set data manipulation language in DBMS. Alright, so we are almost done. Okay, so out of 46 slides, nasa 32 na tayo, so bear with me. Now we have the data modeling summary. To summarize, of course, we have number 1, data modeling is the process of developing data model for the data to be stored in a database. Alright, number 2, data models ensure consistency in naming conventions, default values, security, while ensuring quality of the data. Right, so consistency. And then you have the third, data model structure helps to define the relationship tables. The fourth one, there are of course 3 types of modeling. You have the conceptual, logical, and physical. Next, the main aim or primary goal of conceptual model is to establish the entities, attributes, and relationships. Alright? And then next, you have logical data models define the structure of the data elements and set the relationships between them. Next, you have the physical data model describes the database specific implementation of the data model. Next, you have the main goal of the designing data model is to make certain that data objects, okay, so data objects offered by the functional team are represented accurately represented. Last, you have the biggest drawbacks in is that even smaller change made in the structure requires modification in the entire system. So again, smaller changes impacts the entire application. Alright, so for data modeling summary, that's that. Okay, so moving on. We have the key responsibilities of a database administrator. Alright, so database administrator primary job is to ensure that data is available, protected from loss and corruption, and easily accessible as needed. Okay, so we are going to run through the some of the roles of database administrators. What are their job? Okay. So responsibilities. Number one, of course, you have the software installation and maintenance. Alright, so a DBA often collaborates on the initial installation and configuration of database. Okay, so the system, we have the system administrator. Siya yung nagsiset ng mga hardware and deploys the operating system for a particular database server. Whereas the database administrator installs the database software and configures it for use. As updates and patches are required, the database administrator requires or handles this ongoing maintenance. Okay? Maintenance, and if a new server is needed, the DBA of course handles the transfer of data from existing system to the new platform. So nakita nyo na medyo matrabaho siya, diba? And then next we have is data extraction, transformation, and loading. So ito yung tinatawag nating ETL. Alright, so ETL, data extraction, okay, so transformation and loading refers to efficiently importing large volumes of data. Okay, so efficiently importing large volumes of data that have been extracted from, of course, you have multiple systems into a data warehouse environment. When we talk about ETL, we are talking about, or we are going through a data warehouse environment. And then lastly, you have specialized data handling. Of course, today's database or databases can be massive and may contain unstructured data types, such as images, documents, no? or sounds and video files. Managing a very large database may require higher level skills and additional monitoring and tuning to maintain efficiency. Of course, so given the large scale of the unstructured data, so of course they are going to be handled by the database administrators. Number 4, database backup and recovery. Right, so some of these are self-explanatory naman. So database backup and recovery, they are in charge of that. Of course, weekly ba ito iba-backup? Monthly ba ito iba-backup? Nagkaroon tayo ng problema, we encountered a problem this particular area, this particular time. So we need to recover that data. What did we lose? Okay. So these are some of the responsibilities of DBA. Security, very important role of a DBA is when it comes to security. So a DBA needs to know potential weaknesses of the database software and the company's overall system and work to minimize risk. Of course, you can never eliminate risk. You can only minimize the risks. Okay, so no system is 100% immune to attacks, but implementing best practices can minimize risk. Okay, so you are going to hear that term or the word phrases best practices more often here when you're in the field of IT. And then lastly, you have the authentication. So setting up employees access is an important aspect of database security. So sino ba yung makaka-access ng particular data na to? So authentication. DBA controls who accesses and what type of access they are allowed. So for example, person A can only access a particular area or department. For example, person A can only access level 1, level 2, and then person B can access all 3 levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. So these are all controlled by the database administrators. Alright? Oh, there's more. Right? So capacity planning. So the database administrator needs to know how large the database currently is and how fast it is growing in order to make predictions about future needs. So if your database is um, capacity wise, it is the rate of the um, increasing, or the rate of data entering your being ingested in your database, um, you you would have to plan out, ano? Kailangan niya magplano kung kailangan na ba nating, or do we need to upgrade, or do we need to of course, yes, upgrade. So the keyword there is if you're going to upgrade, and then you have to plan. So next you have the performance monitoring. Performance monitoring. So monitoring databases for performance issues is a part of ongoing system maintenance a DBA performs. So if some parts of the system is slowing down, okay, so mabagal na, no? Processing data, mabagal na siya. The DBA may need to configure changes to the software or add additional hardware. So part pa rin siya ng capacity planning, ano? So of course, if you are monitoring and then you see that the performance or the medyo mabagal na yung system na takbo, so you would have to raise that, ano? Paano ba natin harapin yung issue ganun? Okay, so next you have database tuning. Okay, so database tuning, performance monitoring shows where the database should be tweaking to operate as effectively as possible. Okay, so optimization. Okay, all right. So of course, troubleshooting. That is our. I think that is the last one. So troubleshooting are on call for troubleshooting, of course. So DBAs are on call for troubleshootings in case of any problems. Ano? So whether they need to quickly restore data lost or lost data, or correct an issue to minimize damage, a DBA needs to quickly understand and respond to problems when they occur. So you are encountering a data issue, for example, at 12 midnight. So you have to address that, ano, on call. Yun yung ibig sabihin ng on call for troubleshooting. So you have encountered a problem during a holiday. That is why usually when you are in the IT field, and particularly in the field of data, you can say goodbye to holidays, weekends, you know. So especially if you are encountering an issue in your enterprise or in your organization, you would have to address that as soon as possible. Okay, so when we're talking about data loss, it is crucial. Okay. Alright, so now we are going to move on to the next role, which is the DA or data analyst. Of course, data analyst interprets data and turns it into information which can offer ways to improve a business, thus affecting business decisions. So data analysts gather information from various sources and interpret patterns and trends. Okay, so again, data analysts gathers information from various sources. So these sources could be from different databases and interprets patterns and trends. As such, a data analyst job description should highlight the analytical nature of the role. So these are critical thinkers, analytically oriented. You know? So these are the nature of the data analyst, or what we call DA. Once data has been gathered and interpreted, the data analyst will report back what has been found in the comprehensive area. Alright, so yun yung trabaho ni data analyst. You have a particular data from coming from different sources or various sources, and now you are going to identify or see the commonalities or patterns and trends, and then you are going to interpret that data. Alright, or that data into it could be business decisions, strategies, okay, or whatnot. So data analyst duties and responsibilities of the job. Data analysts often make recommendations about the methods and ways in which a company obtains and analyzes data to improve quality and the efficiency of data systems. A data analyst job description should include but not limited to the following. All right, so number one, collecting and interpreting data, as I've mentioned, analyzing results, of course. After you have collected, interpreted the data, you are now going to analyze. Okay, and third, you have the reporting the results back to the relevant members of the business. So who are the ones, or who are these particular users that are in need of that result? You're going to report that to them. Number four, you have identifying patterns and trends in data sets. So as I've mentioned kanina, no? So once you have the data, you can now analyze the patterns and trends. Are we going to be bankrupt in the next 2 months? Or less than 1 month? Are we going to have a much higher income or higher revenues in the coming 2 months? So you can identify those trends through data sets. Okay. So number five, working alongside teams within the business or management team to establish business needs. Of course, as a data analyst, you are going to be working with developers, BI developers, or yung tinatawag nating business intelligence or BI developers, yung mga teams. Okay, so you're going to work with managers. You're going to work with different areas or different disciplines in terms of IT. Alright, may mga statisticians dyan. Okay? Number six, you have defining new data collection and analyzing process. Okay, so very self-explanatory. You have new data, and then now you are going to analyze the new data and make a decision based on the trends or based on that results. Okay? So now we have the range of database applications and database systems. So database range from those for a singular user with a desktop computer to those on mainframe computer with thousands of users. So the range of database application can be divided into 4 categories from simplest to most complex. Number 1, we have personal computer database. Okay, so for example, a desktop or laptop computer, consider a company that has a number of salespersons who call on actual or prospect customers. Now, each salesperson might carry a laptop computer with a simple database application to record customer information and the details of contacts with each customer. So, some of the key decisions that must be made in developing personal computer databases are as follows. Okay, so we have questions like, should the application be purchased from an outside vendor? Kailangan ba natin bilihin yung ating database? Of course, this is considering the personal aspect, alright? Personal computer databases. Should the application be purchased? If the database application is developed internally, should it be developed by the end user or by a professional? Okay, so these are the questions you're going to ask. What data are required by the user, and how should the database design? How should the database be designed? Okay, so what commercial DBMS products should be used for the application? Who is responsible for the accuracy of the data in the personal computer? Alright, so these are a few of the questions you are going to ask yourselves when you are going to make decisions on developing a personal computer database. Okay, so for the second one, again, we have the work group databases. Okay, so this method of sharing the data in the database is shown in the figure, as you can see. And each member of the work group has a desktop computer and a computer. They are linked, of course, by means of local area network or LAN. The database is stored on the central device called the database server. And so, medyo bitin lang yung text na nakasulat dyan. It is a database server. Thus, each member of the work group has access to each shared data. Alright, so in establishing a work group database, the organization must answer the same questions that apply to personal computers. Okay, so yung kanina mga tanong, by the way, work group database are typically they comprise of fewer than 25 persons. Okay, so how can the design of the database be optimized for variety of group members? Okay, so what we call information requirements. How can the various members use the database concurrently without compromising the integrity of the database? All right. Which database processing operations should be performed at a workstation and which should occur on the server. Right, so those are the questions you are going to ask if you are in need of a workgroup database. Next, we have the department databases. So department is generally larger than a work group, so typically between 25 and 100. So a department is a functional unit within an organization. Typical examples of departments are personnel, marketing, manufacturing, and accounting. All right. Then lastly, we have the enterprise database. Okay, so an enterprise database is one whose scope is the entire organization or enterprise. So as you can see, ito yung kaninang binabanggit kong various data sources. So you would see the yung parang cylinder shape. Cylinder nga ba yung tawag dyan? Or yung parang drum. So the drums would be what we call sources or database. Okay, so you have hospital databases, clinic, nurse, all right, and then you have the corporate office. So that would be the management, what you call the DBMS, and it would store that in a data warehouse. Okay, so such databases are extended to support organization-wide operations and decision making. Arguably, the most important type of enterprise database systems, okay, today is called a data warehouse. A data warehouse is an integrated decision support database whose content is derived from the various operational databases. So yung various operational databases natin are the ones you see in this picture or illustration. You have hospital, clinic, nurse home. Alright, so the data warehouse is integrated decision support database whose content is derived from the various operational databases. So the various operational databases are the hospitals. So you can see there are two hospitals, and then you have the excuse me, you have the clinic, and you have the nursing home. Right, so operational. Right, for our next slide, we have the top 30 most popular database management softwares. So you can search this. You can search this through net and read about them. What are the differences? No, but I will just give you a list of the popular database. Okay, so as you can see, you have there the SolarWind for number 1. Okay, you have Oracle, IBM, SQL Server, SAP, Teradata, MySQL, FileMaker,